Interval training, when it comes to running, it's a cherry on top of the sundae. And when I was a new runner, I thought this was something just for pro runner, people that want to go fast, but I was wrong. If you want to run long distance, if you want to get fitter, interval training might be the right thing for you, and it's for beginner runner just as much as it is for pro runner. It's the polar opposite of when you're doing your long runs or your zone 2 where you're trying to stay fresh. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to get as pooped out as possible. I'm trying to be as intense as possible and feeling as bad as possible as early as possible, which doesn't sound so pleasant, but that's really kind of what it is. Today I want to walk you through what are the benefits, what are the things you need to know, and how I structure my interval trainings. Hi, I'm Simon, welcome to my channel. I'm an ultra runner who's raced 3,400 miler, and this channel is meant to help you in your running journey. Today we're talking intervals, and intervals are much more accessible than people realize and have many more benefit. It's not just for pro runner, it's not complicated, it's very simple to implement, and it will benefit everyone from beginner runner that are starting their journey to pro level athletes. It's a key workout in your schedule. Even if you're training for a major race, 100 mile or these sorts of things, usually we say there's the 80-20 rule, right? The 80% will be your zone 2 training, your long runs, and these sorts of mileage, but you have a 20% that is on speed work. But it's not only interval runs. Intervals are great, but if you're trail running or ultra running, I highly suggest that you also have hill training workout, which I mentioned. And the second one could be either speed work, so maybe tempo run, or intervals. And how often should you do that? I think 1 or 2 sessions a week is plenty enough. If you're looking for tips as to how to create a training plan or how to run longer or run in zone 2, I have videos about these. I suggest you have a look. And why should you have intervals? If you're running long distance, if you're planning to run 100 mile, who cares about being able to run a 6-minute mile, right? Well, there are benefits to it, and your body will adapt differently to intervals than it will for long runs, and you need both to progress in your fitness. You will see benefit on your long run from your interval training. One of the things it's been demonstrated that speed work and intervals is one of the best way to increase your VO2 max. So obviously that's pretty important when we're talking about endurance sports. The other one is that your body will adapt, so your joint, your bones, your ligaments, they will get stronger from that high intensity workout. Then the last one I think is one that you need to be careful about, but at the same time that's a benefit, is that when you run faster, you have to correct your form. So your running form will improve. At the same time, make sure you have a good form when you're running full blast, otherwise you're at risk of injury. What's an interval session? An interval session will be about an hour workout, and the way it's structured is that you will have a warm-up period and you will have a cool-down period, and in between that's where you do your intervals. But it's very, very important to mention the warm-up and the cool-down period, because when you go at full speed like that, you're at very high risk of injury and you don't want to go in cold. You need to get your body used to it, and cooling down, it's going to bring your heart rate down, it's going to help you relax, and it's going to help you for recovery. The amount of time for each period, it's not prescriptive, but personally what I do is a 15-minute warm-up period where I will be jogging at about 10-minute mile, but you need to adjust your pace. Basically it's shuffling at first just to get your heart going, and within that period I will actually have some low spikes of going a little faster than 10-minute mile and just getting my motion ready, getting my legs moving, having the full gait, the full motion that I'm gonna do very soon at full speed, but I'm trying to not exert myself. I'm just trying to get my heart rate raised a little bit and basically ready to rock and roll. Then the cool down period, it's pretty similar, except that I will not have any full gait motion. I will go down probably to a 10-minute mile. You need to adjust or find your pace, but basically it's shuffling. It's just a movement that is extremely comfortable. And in between you will have your intervals, and that's where we're going to talk about how can you structure that to have the maximum benefit from these sessions. But the key concept here is that intervals are high intensity, you cool down, high intensity, you cool down, high intensity, you cool down. What it means that you have a very defined period of time or distance that you're running at a specific pace or intensity, which will be very high intensity, and you have to have a specified period of time of recovery. You shouldn't just say, well, when I'm feeling better, I'm going to start my next intervals. You need to define that from the beginning, and as you will see, it will get harder and harder to recuperate from your previous intervals as you go into a number of sessions, or not a number of sessions, but a number of cycles. I'm warming up. But these cycles can vary, and there's a lot of different ways you can organize that. You will have shorter intervals and you have longer intervals, and I'm gonna go through some examples, but what I think is very important, has helped me a lot, is that it's good to keep it fun. If you change it up, at least for myself, it just makes it more interesting. So try and go online and find different ones and try different ones and do something different, but before you're at the gym or before you're out the door or wherever you're gonna work out, you have to know what you're gonna do. For interval, location is everything. Location, location, location. It's a little different than the other types of workout. When you're trail running, ultra running, a lot of it will be on trail, and as much as possible, I would always recommend go out on trail. You'll get used to your footing, you'll get better at technical running. But interval is not the time to do that. What you're looking for is a place that is very flat, that is not technical, that you'll be able to push at max speed. What we're really trying to do here is being able to exert ourselves to the fullest, and for that you need to not be thinking too much about your footing. You need to be careful, otherwise you would roll your ankle on a trail. So I really don't recommend doing intervals on trail. Maybe some people do that, but that sounds like a terrible idea. So good location, if you have access to a track, that's great. And that's why a lot of intervals are described as 400 meter. But if you're like me, you're like, where the hell would I have access to a track? So the next best one, I think, and it's unfortunate, but it's the treadmill. And the treadmill is extremely practical too, because you can set very accurately the speed you're going at. So I personally use the treadmill all the time. The last place you could do would be out in the street or on the sidewalk, but you just have to be careful that this is an area where you won't have to stop because of a red light, or there won't be pedestrian, or you won't have to stop for cars. So I think the treadmill is the most accessible, and as always, we're not professional athletes. We need to use what we have, and the treadmill for interval training is just perfect. I don't like running on the treadmill, but you gotta do what you gotta do here. You will have cycles that will be describing a distance, and you will have cycles that will describe an amount of time. I actually use the treadmill for all of my intervals workout. And what that means is that it's much easier or simpler to say I'm gonna run for 1 minute or 2 minutes rather than saying I'm gonna do 1 lap at the track. So that's just one of the difference, but you can easily convert based on your pace. If it's 400 meter, what's the equivalent in time? Well, it's probably a little bit less than 2 minutes. But before we dive into that, I'm curious to know, what kind of speed workout are you doing yourself? Are you doing intervals? Are you preferring hills? Are you doing tempo run? Let me know in the comments below, and if you could leave a thumbs up, that's helping me a lot making these videos. Thank you so much. So the first thing is, when you're in recovery mode, I'm a big supporter of active recovery. I think that's what makes the most sense when you're doing ultra running. So either it's walking or shuffling. What's important here is it's a pace that your heart rate will go down, and you're able to prepare for your next interval that is coming up very soon. What's tricky is the high intensity portion of that interval. What's the speed you're supposed to go at? If it was cycling, we would do an FTP test, and we could adjust various intervals based on the power output that you're producing. When it comes to running, the closest you can do to that would either be to adjust based on heart rate or pace. The problem with heart rate is that it makes a lot of sense to do a zone 2 workout, for example, for 1 hour and adjust it based on your heart rate, because the variation in your heart rate through a 60-minute period, you can adjust it, but when it's a 1 minute intervals, that just would not fly at all. You cannot adjust based on your heart rate. So what about the pace? The pace is obviously where you're supposed to go, but there's another way to do it, and it's based on your effort. And eventually, when you know yourself enough, you'll know that 10 mile an hour is, let's say, a 10 out of 10 effort. But before that, it's harder to gauge. So what you will need to do is you will need to practice, and you will need to know what is the right pace for you. And the right pace, all of these intervals, what you're supposed to do, if it's a 1 minute interval or if it's a 1 mile interval, you're supposed to try and go at a steady pace. And when the interval is finished, you're supposed to be pooped out. We're talking about a full-on effort. So obviously a 1 minute interval will be faster than a 1 mile interval. But at the end of it, you feel like shit. It's an all-out effort. It's a pedal to the metal, ball to the wall, call it whatever you want, but you're going as fast as you could. Figuring that out is a little tricky. So the first few sessions you're doing with, let's say, a 1 minute interval cycle, what I did at the gym, it's probably the easiest, and that's also why I think a treadmill is very practical for interval training, is that you probably have a sense of how fast you can go for 1 minute. Go a little lower than that for your first cycle, and let's call it you go at 8 miles an hour. So boop boop, 8 miles an hour, you go for 1 minute, and of course you're tired after that, but it feels that, I could have gone a little faster. So next time maybe you do 8.1 or 8.2 for the next cycle. How did you feel? Oh yeah, I could have done a little more, and you increase a little bit every time, and eventually you'll find it. You'll find that, oh my god, I couldn't go for 1 minute and 5 seconds. Like, I'm so glad this interval is done. And that's the right pace for it. For me, when I do these intervals, usually it will take, especially short intervals, it will take me like a minute and a half to kind of, okay, start to think about there's a next one coming up. But the next interval, I'll still be able to, let's go. Then the other question is, how many cycles should you be doing? We're talking about 1 hour total, but the actual cycle period is probably 30, 40 minutes. Anything more than that, you're at high risk of injury, and you're getting at the point of diminishing return. So there's really no point. And that means, well, if you're doing 1 minute intervals, you can do more than if you're doing 4 minute intervals, and you can just adjust based on that. But very often you'll see things like 6, 8, 10 intervals. I guess we like even number for some reason. You have, and I'll give some specific example that I think have worked very well for me. One important thing that I want to emphasize here is that this is fairly advanced the way I describe it, but interval training is for everyone, no matter your level. And the number I'm going to provide, or the example, are what I'm using myself, but don't be intimidated. If you're really early in your running journey, what you can start with is first walking during your recovery, walking during the warm-up period, having shorter intervals if that's all you can manage. First you can do maybe 3 cycles, and eventually 4 cycles, 5 cycles, and so on. And eventually what you will do is pick up the pace. But at first, just find ways to do these amount of time, and you will see the progression. And we all start somewhere, so don't be intimidated by that. There's no pace that is too slow. You need to adjust it to yourself. Showtime! So the first one that I actually like a lot, because I feel this is doing the opposite of what I'm used to in ultra running, are 1 minute intervals, where I will go full blast, and I will usually do cycles, 10 cycles of 1 minute full blast, 3 minute rest, 1 minute, 3 minute, 1 minute, 3 minute, and then I do my warm up and cool down period. And this is a pace for me that is about 11 miles an hour. You really need to adjust on yourself, but it's, you're holding to dear life on the treadmill. You kind of feel that you're about to be on a fail video where it's just like the treadmill is catapulting you because you're going so fast. But that's what we're doing, right? We're going super high, super low, super high, super low. And I actually enjoy, or feel that it's very good for me to have these 3 minutes where I'm just jogging. Usually for me it will be about 10 minute mile, sometimes a little slower, where I'm just shuffling, but I'm moving, and that replicates very well what you're doing sometimes when you're running up a hill, or it's running hills a little bit, and instead of just you find ways to keep going, but also, even though you're moving, your body is healing and is preparing for the next hill, or in this case, the next interval.
You better not do it slow.
The other one that I do frequently are 2-minute intervals, and I still remain a 3-minute period of break. So it's 2 minutes. It's gonna be a little slower. It's gonna be closer to a 10 mile an hour, usually for a 2 minute for me, followed by 3 minutes, and I will do 8 of them. Is there a science behind that? Not really, but the amount of time kind of works out decently well. And then the next one is one that is, I guess that's still interval. I don't know what's the official limit of what's an interval or not, but it's still a cycle of high intensity, lower intensity, and it will be a 1 mile. And you already noticed the difference is that I'm actually counting in the distance and not in time anymore. But I try to do a mile as fast as possible. Then I will rest, and the rest for that I will do a 5-minute rest. Then I do another mile. And the big difference here is that I do the mile as fast as I can, but as opposed to the other interval where I try to keep at the high intensity is always the same pace, this one I just do it as fast as I can, and you can see the degradation as to the first one will be much faster, then I'm a little slower, then I'm a little slower, and I'm not trying to be sustainable. So that's it, folks. Interval training in a nutshell. This is more of a beginner guide to get you out there doing some intervals. I'm curious in the comments below, have you done interval training before? What was a structure that you've tried and that you've enjoyed? And as always, thanks for watching. Please consider leaving a thumbs up. That's helping me a lot on my channel.